I must say hello to everyone around the world. Today I have a special video on a little history of Israel. Who owned the land of Israel and who should be living on the land of Israel? How the Jewish people came into existence and how the land of Israel. Do the Arabs have the right to dominate the land of Israel? Should the Palestinians, who are Arabs, live on the land of Israel? Who has the right to live on the land of Israel? Well, I would like the world to watch this video and so they can know the truth or have the truth known to them that Israel, the Israelites, are the people who have the right of the land of Israel. Please don't forget to press the subscribe button to show your appreciation to my channel. Thank you.
What an honor to be here for this incredible ceremony. Mr. Prime Minister, Secretary Rubio, all of the wonderful people who made this possible by their generosity, contributing to something that is historic and something that is a living memorial of what God has done. It was 4,000 years ago here in this city on Mount Moriah where God chose his people. He not only chose a people, but he chose a place. And then he chose for the people in this place a purpose. The people were the Jewish people. The place was Israel. And the purpose was to be a light to the world and to show that we don't have to look for God because he is looking for us. And that is what so separates the long history of why this city is so important. It's also a reminder to us that this little bitty sliver of real estate on the vast planet Earth is the most contested piece of land in all of human history. Not because of just those who want it, but because of those who don't want the Jewish people to have it. But tonight, something is extraordinary that we celebrate. For 3,000 years ago, David established his kingdom here. And 2,000 years ago, the world, through the Romans, decided we'll get rid of the Jews. And they destroyed this place. And they scattered the Jewish people across the planet. But that wasn't the end of the story. Tonight, we're sitting here because the story is not just alive. It's more alive than perhaps it has been in the 4,000 years that God chose his people, his place, his purpose. And it is an extraordinary thing to behold. Tonight, I'm reminded of the day that the embassy was dedicated in 2018. I was so grateful to President Trump for making the bold and courageous decision that despite all of the opposition across the planet, he was going to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, as he should. Other presidents promised it, but they always found a reason to back away. President Trump made a promise, and he kept the promise. And on the day that we were here, and I was overwhelmed with emotion as I sat at the dedication of the embassy having moved to Jerusalem, there was a young man in the crowd, and he was exuberant. He was an American, and he was looking around and he said, "Wow, I've been waiting 20 years for this to happen. Sheldon Adelson, who along with his wife Miriam, who is here tonight, major contributors to this incredible excavation. Sheldon, who I absolutely adored because he was one of the funniest men I've ever known. When the young man said, "Wow, I've waited 20 years for this," Sheldon, in his very dry way, just looked and said, "Son, we've been waiting 2,000 years for this." What a great reminder that the Jewish people are a patient people. And tonight there's something extraordinary, truly extraordinary, to celebrate. It was David, the king and the psalmist, who said in Psalm 137 and verse 5, "If I forget you, O Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its skill." The Jewish people never forgot that this was their land, their home, their undivided, indisputable, indigenous capital from eternity. And tonight, something truly extraordinary happens. It is often said that history is to a civilization what memory is to the individual. If any of us were to wake up tomorrow and not remember where we lived or who we were or who that woman is that is living in our house because we didn't know her to be our wife, amnesia is a horrible thing to have because one is disoriented, lost, completely unable to make a connection just to the simplest things of life. But history is to a civilization what memory is to the individual. And tonight, this is a celebration of the history of Jerusalem. There is a verse in the New Testament, in Luke, verse 40 of chapter 19, and it says this: "If the crowds keep quiet, the stones will cry out. If the crowds don't acknowledge it, the stones will cry out." Tonight, the stones are crying out. The crowds may say it, but the stones absolutely and 100% validate that the Jewish people not only belong here now, but they have belonged here for 4,000 years, since the time God said to Abraham, "This is yours. Take good care of it. And you'll be a blessing to the people around the earth." And even to those of us who aren't even Jewish. He says, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. And I come here tonight because I'd rather have a blessing than a curse. I recognize that this extraordinary excavation is not just dust and stone. It is a living speech in which God is crying out through the very stones to say to the world, this magnificent excavation, this extraordinary piece of archaeological mastery is a validation and a truth, and it is shouting from the top of the mountain that this is indeed the eternal home of the Jewish people, the Jewish state, and the people who rightly belong here. And tonight the rest of the world comes to say, welcome home, and may no one ever, ever attempt to take your home from you. It is yours. And those of us who are not Jewish, we thank you for giving all of us a foundation of morality and decency and civilization upon which our own faith is built, for without yours, we don't have one. As I often tell my Jewish friends, you can be Jewish, you don't need me. But I cannot be who I am in my faith without the debt of obligation that I owe to you for having listened to God and been willing to be obedient to him when he called you to this place as his people for his eternal, everlasting purpose. And I salute you and join you tonight in the celebration of this wonderful, magnificent, incredible reminder that God never has been finished with Israel, and he never will be. This is the eternal home that he has chosen. That he has chosen. God bless you all.
Now with former Israeli soldier Daniel Rubenstein. Daniel, a pleasure to have you on the show. I don't know if you just listened to my previous conversation with the Deputy Secretary General of the Fatah Central Committee, and he was saying there that he just doesn't think the US has supported the Palestinian people in this cause.
I'm not sure what that type of support would look like. We have in Gaza right now a government called Hamas. This is the same Hamas government that ordered the October 7th massacre. They are fighting from densely populated civilian areas. They are holding hostages where they are torturing and starving them. And right now we're waiting to see if Hamas will accept the ransom payment that Israel is offering that will see the surviving hostages and the bodies of the dead hostages returned home and Hamas leave power in Gaza. This is the key point that every Palestinian spokesperson should be asked. Should Hamas give up power in Gaza? This needs to be a clear yes. The people of Israel are not going to live walking distance from the terrorist army that invaded and gunned down hundreds of people at a music festival and went house to house, killing people in their homes and taking grandmothers and toddlers as hostages. Hamas needs to leave power, and it's using the hostages in order to remain in power. We need a deal that sees the release of the hostages and the exile of Hamas and the end of Hamas power in Gaza so that a new future can take hold that will benefit Israelis and Palestinians alike.
So, Daniel, Hamas has actually accepted the deal. That hasn't changed very much, according to reports. Should Netanyahu now do the same thing?
I've seen the report that Hamas accepted the deal. I would like to see the specific terms that Hamas has accepted. Sometimes what Hamas does is negotiates with itself, accepts its own negotiations, and says that it has accepted a deal. Right now, we understand that the Israeli government is studying precisely what Hamas has accepted and if it is acceptable to the Israeli government.
Okay, Daniel, so I just want to talk to you a little bit about the Israeli government, and some far-right members of Israel's coalition have ruled out a proposed hostage deal with Hamas. But the Prime Minister, as you said, is going over the final details, yet to state his position. So my question to you is, why do some members of the coalition want to keep on fighting, which is killing Gazans and Israeli soldiers?
It's a very difficult situation before us. As I mentioned, within walking distance of Israeli villages, now we're crossing the border, going inside Gaza, there is a terrorist jihadist army that is governing Gaza and threatening to carry out more October 7th massacres until Israel is destroyed. Hamas leaders look at what they did on October 7th, and they say that if given the opportunity, they would do it again. So there are some members of the Israeli government and the Israeli public that say we need to be careful about the ransom that we pay to Hamas, because if that ransom cements Hamas's power in Gaza and allows Hamas to preside over the reconstruction of Gaza, meaning Hamas would be receiving cement and other materials that it can use for military purposes, we will be right back where we were, because Hamas says that it's going to keep killing Israelis until there is no Israel. So we need a deal that will see Hamas out of power, because we don't want to be back in more wars. We want this to be the last war.
So, Daniel, a lot of people listening to this will be hearing exactly what you say, like I am. And some people will say, yes, Hamas did commit October the 7th, which was an absolute atrocity, and nobody supported that at all. And then a lot of people will be watching the TV now, and they'll be seeing starving Palestinians, people who are malnourished, the constant bombardment, people who have been displaced from their homes multiple times, not just once. So I think a lot of people are saying that is Israel not now behaving disproportionately?
There's a very logical point that everyone should be pressuring the Hamas government of Gaza to do, and that is to surrender and release the hostages and let everyone move on and have a better life. There cannot be a good life in this region if Gaza is governed by a terrorist army that is pledging to annihilate its neighbor. This is the key point. Hamas wants to destroy Israel, and there are horrific consequences for Hamas's decision to use populated areas of Gaza as a base of operations for attacking the people of Israel. Hamas is saying we're going to keep using residential areas, we're going to keep using the mosques, we're going to keep using the schools, we're going to have an underground tunnel network under residential areas, and we're going to fight Israel from there. And much of the world expects Israel to do absolutely nothing in response to these attacks because of the consequences inside Gaza. I think everyone needs to use common sense and see that there is a jihadist terrorist army that is using Gaza as a base for saying and attacking Israel. They want to kill everyone in Israel. This cannot be allowed to happen. If they are dealing with difficulties in Gaza, which they are because of Hamas's decision, then the correct decision is to pressure Hamas to surrender power, to give up the hostages, and let us all move on. If we do not do anything, the people of Israel will be under attack again and again and again.
So, Daniel, do you think the Palestinian people are under attack? Over 61,000 have died.
I think the Palestinian civilians are caught in the middle of a very intense war between the Hamas government of Gaza and all of Israel. There are civilians who are caught in the middle. Israel is trying to encourage them to move to safer areas, but they have very few areas to go because the neighbor of Gaza, which is Egypt, is not allowing people from Gaza to exit safely. So much of the world is saying that the people of Gaza need to remain exactly where they are and deal with the consequences of Hamas's decision to use those very homes as bases of attack. I think it's completely irresponsible. It's illogical. This war needs to end, and it needs to end with the whole world pressuring Hamas and not Israel.
So Netanyahu has actually slammed the French President Emmanuel Macron for fueling an anti-Semitic fire after the leader's move to recognize a Palestinian state. Why is Israel's government alienating its Western allies?
Well, why are the Western allies alienated is a question for them to answer. I think they are attempting to appease their own public and to show that they can do something. But they're not doing the one thing which I am repeatedly emphasizing that they need to do if we're going to have a better future, and it is to see the Hamas government of Gaza out of power and without weapons, because this Hamas government is going to continue using Gaza as a base for attacking Israel. And if Israel defending itself against this jihadist death cult in Gaza is going to alienate the French government, then the French government is simply going to be alienated. There is no way around it for the people of Israel who are living side by side with a death cult that is holding our own citizens underground, starving them and torturing them, and saying, if you want these citizens to ever come home, you need to let us be in a position to carry out more attacks on you. This is the position that Israel finds itself in. I think every government around the world should understand the position that Israel finds itself in, and that especially those countries that have relations with Hamas, such as Qatar, such as Turkey, such as Egypt, need to pressure Hamas to end the war by surrendering and releasing the hostages. I remind your viewers that Hamas's leaders live in Qatar. Qatar could be a big help. This is the Emir of Qatar. I think people should know who he is because he's in a position to have a tremendous influence on the Hamas leaders who live in his capital. He has not called on the Hamas leaders to give up power and release the hostages. I think that would make a big impression if he did so.
Daniel, just one final thought. We are running out of time, but you know, we're talking about a proposed ceasefire deal here, and you know, we've been discussing Israel feels that it's desperately under threat. The Palestinian people are facing a humanitarian crisis and bombardment. Do you have any hope at all that diplomacy, Daniel, is going to work in this situation and that a ceasefire deal can be reached?
It's very hard to find middle ground between Hamas on the one side, which is saying it's going to fight Israel forever until Israel's destroyed, and Israel on the other side, which is saying we don't want to be destroyed. This is the position that we find ourselves in. And as long as Hamas's position is that Israel must be destroyed, then there can't be diplomacy. Right now, we are trying to find a way out, and Israel is willing to pay a very high ransom to the people who invaded Israel and took hostages to say, let the hostages go, give up power, and you can survive. This is our willingness to pay a ransom to bring an end to this war and to see the safe return of the hostages. But we cannot be in a situation where the same people who invaded Israel and took hostages are just next door to us and promising that they're going to do it all again That's not a diplomatic way, and I don't think there's a diplomatic solution aside from pressuring Hamas to release the hostages immediately and to end the war that it started.
Daniel Rubenstein, thank you for joining the show.
The culture where I came from is the death culture. That's very unfortunate. And of course, people come and say, don't generalize, which means that I have to go through every detail of my childhood conditioning, which I can write hundreds of books and it wouldn't even cover what I had to witness in such a culture. And when I come and say death culture, they say this is generalization. When I say that this is a barbaric society that praised suicide bombing attacks, that celebrated the death of Jews for being Jews, that wants the destruction of the state of Israel because it's a Jewish state, that doesn't have the capacity to build a nation, that does not have leadership, that is infested with sick ideologies, Soviet, communist, Islamic, jihadist. And today, anybody can claim to be a Palestinian. What was it like for a child to grow up in such environment where infinite forces clash for power, that rely solely on false narratives to achieve their political agendas? A culture that glorify sacrificing children for political and financial gain. What else do I need to say? Haven't we seen the Gazans celebrate on October 7 the kidnapping and the butchering of innocent civilians? We have forgotten. So will it even make any difference if I just continue shouting out loud to tell them that the alternative is dark, that the alternative is death? It wouldn't make any difference. So, and what's the point of me sharing my pain? As a first-hand observer, I spent half of my life among what's so-called Palestinians and half of my life among the Jewish people. I don't see a problem with the Jewish people. They can coexist pretty much with anybody. But the Palestinians, if the world does not meet with their political ambition, they retreat they decide to become violent, global violence. And the ones with short memory should refresh their memory of how many suicide bombing attacks have been committed by the name of Palestine, how many commercial airlines have been hijacked by the name of Palestine, how many massacres, global terrorism. I'm not talking about a war for land within the Palestinian territories. It's not that. So how much do we need to learn? How many times do I need to speak? How many books I need to write for the world to understand that the Palestinians,
do you know what Apple
are the problem? And in fact, their tragedy is self-inflicted tragedy. And I don't expect from Israel not to defend itself. If I was in Israel's position and somebody is determined to harm me, to kill me for who I am, and I don't have the intention to harm them, then I have the right to defend myself. Israel does not want to fight with these savages. It has been 70 years already. And nothing worked with them. Negotiations failed. Offers for statehood failed. All type of reasonable, peaceful means have failed. What else more than 100 years of trying to find the reconciliation, to find a resolution. But how can you communicate with people when they have the first option they have is violence? With people who don't have a legitimate representative, people who are conflicted on each other, people who serve foreign entities at the expense of children and their future. So the world needs to just step into Israel's shoes for a moment and think, how would they handle such a society?
And exacerbating an already sensitive issue in this war is this distinction between a Gazan civilian and a Hamas terrorist. We've seen images of mothers in Gaza taking children to those dehumanizing ceremonies when hostages were freed. We've seen them cheering in front of coffins of Jewish babies. And the IDF is facing this intense scrutiny to protect civilian lives as it tries to eradicate the Hamas threat in this densely populated area. What more can you tell us about the way Hamas uses civilians as human shields and this important distinction, so-called?
There is no modern army that has been prepared for such a scenario where terrorists hijack a very populated area, dig tunnels, deeply embedded below schools, hospitals, who use their own children as human shields. This is what the West does not understand. It's very hard for Westerners to fathom the thought that this is a culture that is based on martyrdom. The concept of jihad, the concept of Islam, on the top of that, Palestinianism, which is all depend on victim narrative that is seeking vengeance, which could go in vicious cycles for eternity. Hamas crime is unforgivable. What they did to the Gazan society. Are there any civilians in Gaza? Of course there are civilians. But also, the civilians voted for Hamas. A vast majority of Gazans voted for Hamas. Just take, for example, Hamas had their establishment anniversary every year. More than 500,000 Gazans participated in that celebration. It falls on December 14th. You can go to the previous years prior to October 7th. And when you see hundreds of thousands of people, 500,000 people, this is a huge numbers. These are all committed Hamas members, the ones who were able to participate. Then the landslide of Hamas victory that brought them to power. Then incitement for violence, in child indoctrination. The mosques have been part of this process. Schools have been part of the process. The UNRWA has been part of the process. The entire society is complicit in Hamas crime. And I am not saying that everybody deserves to die in Gaza, and Israel is not saying that. And all the claims that this is a collective punishment is untrue. And if there was such thing as collective punishment, then Hamas is to blame, not Israel. Because Israel asked the civilians to evacuate
The quickest way to
from the warring area. But Hamas does not want them to evacuate. And also, when Hamas big targets hide among civilians and in residential buildings, thinking that they can be immune only because there are children and women in these buildings, I don't think it's Israel's fault if the civilians get hurt in the process. And how Israel could actually fight a group like Hamas without any civilian casualties? And all those who say that proportionality, etc., why don't they come down to Gaza and do the job? If they really care for the Gazan children. I want to see all these mediocres who have been given advice to Israel how to do the job. Bring your troops or stop talking and come down to Gaza. Show me how you're going to deal with a terrorist group who hijacked their own society, sacrificed their own children for global sympathy. Show me how you can deal with this type of savagery. So Israel is doing the impossible job. Nobody has the authority to tell Israel how to do it. And if they don't like how it's done, then show me how you can finish this problem. Give me a comprehensive plan. None of them has a plan. They only can do condemn the IDF in this existential fight, demonize Israel, demonize the Jewish people, but they don't have a solution. They don't have an alternative. They don't even know the reality on the ground. So with that said, as long as Israel is fighting and defending itself, and in fact, as long as Israel is fighting on behalf of the free world, no one has the right to interfere in this business.
And finally, it certainly seems a long way off now, given what you're saying, but much has been made about the day after in Gaza without Hamas. The ideology, of course, would still remain. From your perspective, what does Gaza look like without Hamas in charge?
There is no Gaza anymore. It's finished. It's a rubble. It's going to take at least 10 to 15 years to remove the rubble. And nobody's going to buy this rubble. It's mountains of concrete everywhere, thanks to Hamas for using every household as a shooting pad, where Israel had no choice but to demolish those buildings because Israel was not willing and still not willing to sacrifice the foot soldiers in Hamas trapped buildings. Israel had to evacuate the civilians, then to demolish most of the buildings so they could progress and get to Hamas tunnels. This is the reality that most of the jokers around the world don't understand how hard it is. Expecting from Israel to sacrifice tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of soldiers in its fight against those who choose to hide behind children and women. So today Gaza is a rubble as the outcome of Hamas' evil work. So who's going to remove this rubble and how many years is going to take? It would be much easier to evacuate the civilians, at least give them the freedom to choose countries wherever they want to go, because the humanitarian crisis will deepen. Those who say rebuild Gaza, on what terms? Who's going to rebuild Gaza? Who's going to remove the rubble? How many years this is going to take? And what about the 2 million civilians? What they're going to do in the meantime as Gaza is being rebuilt according the terrorists who want to rebuild Gaza and bring us back to the first square. This is not acceptable. I think the world needs to help the Gazans if they choose to leave, to go somewhere else, wherever they want to go, especially the countries that recognize the Palestinian State. They should take tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of those Gazans into their countries if they really care for the Gazans. But I don't think that they care for the Gazans. I think this is just their power game to mock their adversaries. So the reality of Gaza, if we don't allow the civilians to choose their freedom, and I say for those who want to stay in Gaza, it's their right to stay in Gaza, but I have to warn them, for the next 10 or 15 years, Gaza is going to be infested in disease. There is not going to be housing. This is not going to happen overnight. The destruction is huge. People have no idea. So with that said, let the people have their freedom. If they want to go to Egypt, if they want to go to Jordan, if they want to go to France, I highly recommend that they go to France, to Spain, to the UK, to Australia, because the people there love Palestinians very much. And if they love Palestinians that much, take them in. In the meantime, I hope that Trump's plan go through to build the Rivera. I want an American model in Gaza. I don't want a jihadi model. We are done of the jihadi Islamist model. We saw what they are capable of doing. And the Palestinian cause as a device in the hands of all terrorists around the globe and all fanatics around the globe must die. I am going to take this device away from them. No Palestine, no Palestinian, no Palestinianism. The Arabs who choose to stay as neighbors of Israel in Judea and Samaria, in the West Bank, or even in the surrounding countries need to respect Israel's sovereignty. And if they haven't learned from Gaza, then Israel is determined to show them that Israel is going nowhere and they will be the only suffering side. It's as simple as that.
Mossab Hassan Youssef, thank you for being with us on I-24 News.